Hey, welcome back to the El Camino project presented by Quick-Carbuilders. This step of the project we'll be filling in some holes in the body. We're going to start on the rear quarter panels. There were some running lights back there, and of course the gas filler door that was back there. So we'll be doing a little bit of sheet metal work, a little bit of grinding, cutting, making some sparks, all that fun stuff. So stay with us here and let's just jump on in and get started. Alright, this is the first spot we're going to start. As you can see, we've got the body turned up here so we can get to these spots. This was a little filler hole back here. I think it was more of a drain than anything when they dipped these cars for painting. These plugs went in there after they were done. It's a good place to let all the paint come out. And I'm not really sure what the heck this little rod is up underneath here. There's something up in there, but anyway, we're going to leave that. The idea here is, of course, we're trying to keep water from getting down inside of here, and so there was two holes here. This hole was where the wiring harness came through for the light, and this one was a drain hole for paint, I'm assuming. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a couple pieces of sheet metal and fill these two holes in, and once that's done, then we'll flip this thing over and we'll hit the hole over here where the running light was. First thing we're going to do before we start any welding is we got to get all the junk off of here. There's a lot of dirt, a lot of body filler. This little plug that was in here before was basically wedged in there, and then they had put a bunch of seam sealer around it. And I planned on maybe just welding this in, but it's got some holes in it where these tabs fit down in there, so instead of trying to use something that's going to leak and get water, the last thing we want to do is let water get down inside of this quarter panel. Because once it gets in there, there's no place for it to go. So first thing we're going to do before we start welding is get this area cleaned up right here. I'm making a small little piece to fill in that one hole, and I'm basically taking a piece of 18 gauge, and instead of cutting it in a circle, I just kind of cut a square and clip the edges off to round it up a little bit. I drilled a hole in the center. What I'm going to do is use that hole to fish this thing up and feed it up underneath the hole and give me something to pull it up against. I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a second. But the other thing I want to do is I need to kind of curve this thing, kind of make it kind of concave, so when I fit it up into that hole from underneath there, that it'll be rounded and it'll fit up into the hole that I'm trying to fill in real good. So the way I'm going to do that is just by taking a ball peen hammer and just start tapping around on the inside of this. And as I do this, what it's doing, it's compressing the metal, which is causing this thing, going to cause this thing to kind of dome a little bit. Now you can see how it's just brought the center out a little bit by doing that. That way when I fit that piece up into that hole, it'll have a good area out here to touch instead of the whole thing trying to lay flat across it and maybe hitting something outside of it. So if I need to get it to go round up a little bit more, I can just tap on it some more. And so here's the purpose of the hole. This is just a piece of fishing line. This is plastic coated steel stranded line, but you could use anything. Use a piece of welding wire or whatever you got. Just make sure it's metal. And I'm just going to tie a knot in one end of it. And then I can fish this up through the hole, because it's kind of hard to get my hand up in there. I can fish this line up through the other hole in the body and pull this piece up so that it stays snug up against there where I'm going to weld. Let's move over there and I'll show you what we're going to do. I fed this wire up through here, and now I can pull my piece up tight, get it centered in there, and then that'll let me hold it in place while I tack it. Alright, at that point I can just clip that off or try to pull it through, whichever one I want to do. In that case it just pulled right through the hole. And now I got it in place. All I have to do when I'm finished is just fill in that hole in the middle and we're good to go. Okay, it's all tacked in, welded in, and now we'll just finish it off with a little grinding. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and get this hole filled in where the gas filler door was at. There was 5 holes here, and we've gone ahead and welded those up. What we're going to be doing, of course, is smoothing this by putting a piece of sheet metal and filling this big hole in. But in order to do that, we want to make sure that no water gets in behind it, because as you can see, if it does, it'll just sit in there and cause rust. So that's why we welded these holes up. We'll be cutting a piece of sheet metal out the size of this and going ahead and welding that in and getting that all sealed up. And then the final step will be cutting the piece to go on the exterior. Well, we got that hole filled in. The only thing we'll have to do is on the back side of it is put some sealer around it, and that'll keep any water from getting back up in there. And then our next thing we'll do is we're going to cut a piece of sheet metal out that'll fit this outline here, and we'll weld that in, which will be the exterior part. So that'll keep any water from getting in and give us a nice smooth finish here. We ran into another one of those little uh-ohs while we were doing this. We were buffing off some of the paint, and we discovered that this fender, this quarter panel, has been into before. Whoever did it actually did a pretty good job on it. We started noticing these little holes here. Of course, this is rust. These little holes along here. Somebody's had a dent puller in there before and pulled this thing out, and then there's about a 1/8 to a 3/16 of an inch worth of Bondo all over this thing right here. So we're going to add that to the list of things to fix. Of course, we started off filling this hole and filling this hole, and that's what we ran into. The back part here looks okay. So I'm going to check in and see if maybe we can just get a new piece of sheet metal to weld in there, because it looks like this thing got buckled in, and it's going to be hard to get it back out and get it real straight without going back with the body filler like what they did. So whoever did that did a good job of it, but you know, we're getting down to bare metal and fixing this thing up right, so that'll have to be fixed. So we're not going to get sidetracked on that for right now. We're going to go ahead and continue to fill in these holes that we planned on to start with. So next step here, we're going to cut this piece of sheet metal out and get this door filled in where the gas filler was. I'm going to go ahead and make the template now for filling this piece in. This is the easiest way I found to do this. I cut a piece of poster board just a little bit bigger than the piece I'm doing, and if I just put it on there and go around here and kind of push it down a little bit, forms a pretty good little line. go, you can see the outline of it, and just trim it out from there. I got the template cut. The idea behind this is not to cover it up, but to kind of go down just a little bit inside of it. Reason being, when we'll obviously be going back over this with some body filler to give us a nice smooth edge here. So as you know, when you're putting sheet metal in like this, we want to make sure that it's recessed just a little bit. We don't want to have to grind sheet metal down to get the smooth finish to it. So I've got this thing cut. It's pretty close, about as close as I'm going to get with the paper. Then what I'll do is, once I transfer this onto the sheet metal and cut the sheet metal out, then I'll do any little fine grinding or fine tuning on the sheet metal. But the idea being, this has a little bit of a rounded edge to it, so it'll make it a little better. But get this piece of sheet metal to just drop down just a little bit inside of that hole, to where it's just slightly below the level of the sheet metal on here. That'll allow me to run a good bead around here. When I grind that down, then this will be indented just a little bit, which will allow us to get a good smooth finish on it. Okay, we've started tacking this thing in. I've got it laying a little bit lower than the body panel, the quarter panel. So once we get this thing welded in, I'll be able to grind this edge down smooth, and then we'll finish it off with body filler. So I'm going to go ahead and get a few more tacks around here and then go ahead and fill it in. Woo. I used to weld with something besides sandals on too. Looking good. All right, hit the grinder after that. Move on to the next hole. This is the running light on the rear quarter panel on the passenger side. So we've got our patch piece all welded in there, and just need to go in there and grind that, and that'll be done. So next thing we'll do on this step of the project is we're going to go ahead and work on smoothing the front fenders. While we're making our way to the fenders, there's a few more little spots here. There's some little holes where they had the trim around the fender well. So we've buffed those off there to get all the paint off. We're going to go ahead and fill those in too, just to make sure we get all these holes smoothed out. This is the passenger side fender, front fender, and we've already gone ahead and tacked in some of these small holes here where there was some trim screws. We've got all those filled in. We're going to have to do a little bit of patching from behind. These are not small enough to really tack in, so we're going to cut a little tiny piece of sheet metal,
put it up from behind there, and then we'll fill those in. There's one there and there's two here. These held some pretty big screws. Why they had these holes that big, just to hold on some trim, I don't know, but they did. So we'll go ahead and get those filled in now. I just cut a little piece of sheet metal out, and I put a dot right in the center of it, so when I put it up there from behind the hole, I can make sure I've got it centered in there. So I'm just going to come in here from behind, put it up there in place.
It's hot.
Alright, now I just have to fill that in. And once again, we want to go real slow on this, because the last thing we want to do is warp this. So just going to do some tacks around there and let it cool, and we'll just keep coming back to it. Meanwhile, while we're working this one, there's two more up in the front, so I'm going to alternate between the two so I can give each one of them plenty of time to cool off. Alright, this one's now filled in, and we'll of course go back and grind all these down. So we'll focus on getting the other two at the other end done now. Even with grinding, you're going to want to watch the heat, because you can build up a lot of heat grinding down a weld like this. So you want to make sure that you give the metal some time to cool in between. While finishing the last fender, our compressor started making a little bit of noise, and it looks like it busted a rod. So I'm going to have to order some parts for that. So our next step was going to be to fix some rust spots on the body, but I think what we'll do is go ahead and skip that and go on to shaving the doors. We can dismantle the doors and get them taken apart without having to use any air, so this will take a couple days to get this fixed. Well, except for the grinding, this step of the project's finished. We got all of our holes filled in. All these up around here where the screws were holding in that trim. A couple of big holes up here we got filled in, and then these back here. So this step of the project's finished. We'll touch these up later when our compressor's back online. So, but for now we'll call this done and move on to the next step.